Hello, I'm Dave Sergio,
And I'm Don Sergio.
and we are the guys who make your Calfkiller beer.
Hell yeah.
Actually, it's our Calfkiller beer, but we make it for you to enjoy. So basically, the idea of Calfkiller started sometime around the year 2001. Don and I started homebrewing, and basically just kind of really started honing our craft and using ideas and beer, just kind of beer things and cooking ideas that we'd had to make really good beer. And so 2003, when Don and Kelly, Kelly is Don's wife, when they bought the piece of property that the brewery now sits on, we actually turned a little small horse barn into this little small brewery, because Don and I knew once we first saw the building that this is actually what we wanted our little home brewery to look like. We wanted it kind of to be this really nice little, place that was used a lot of, just recycled construction materials, because that's what the business we were in at the time. And we just wanted this place that felt very at home, someplace we were very comfortable in to be able to make beer. So we started crafting many beers. Somewhere around the year 2004, we actually ended up coming up with the Calfkiller, the logo that we have now.
The logo actually was drawn by us, and we got it. We actually were running around in 2004 because we built this, like Dave said, I think we go deeper into the fact that we were in a family construction business for 20 years prior to this, and that's all we had ever done. And so this thing was a hobby, but the hobby was fun. And in 2004, when we got this place done with these recycled parts, we started making Calfkiller beer. Every time we made beer, it was Calfkiller beer, because we already had the thing. And we would go around and do, from 2004 to 2010, we would go around and do family functions and friends' weddings and things of that nature. And we'd purvey the Calfkiller beer, and we'd make special beers for whoever's wedding. You know what I'm saying? It was just, it was kind of like, I don't know, we felt like, it was Calfkiller beer. It's always had the same, it's always been the same, but different. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So it's always been like you riding on the edge of beerdom. You know what I'm saying? There was no real recipe from some book. There was more like like Dave said, a concept for something, and it's something that carries true to today, actually. And we're professional. We're professionals.
Professionals?
So, but anyways, from 2004 to 2010, that's what we did. And around about the year 2006, Dave and I decided that we would bring this idea of this Calfkiller beer into a bit more of a something refined, something legitimate. So what we did is we came up with the idea of having a small brewery. The first idea was going to be that we were a 2-barrel brewery, which actually is big now to some nano breweries.
Yeah.
Which makes me raise an eyebrow. But either way.
Well, and a barrel is 31 gallons of beer.
Right.
And so we were just going to basically have these kettles that we had found that we were going to do, basically about 65 gallons of beer at a time, and just be these two dudes that made this little bit of beer for a bar or a restaurant that wanted it, and then had enough beer for ourselves, and something to get us out of that construction, kind of like our construction side jobs. We'd still have our full-time day jobs, but construction side jobs would hopefully cease, and we could just make beer
On the side. So yeah, we come home and make beer instead of coming home and going to build somebody's porch. That was the idea. So at any rate, round about 2006, we actually have to go to the beer board of the city of Sparta, which is a 3-panel committee made up of folks in the county commission, and they have to, they give the licenses to folks who want to do something with beer, be it restaurants, be it whatever, which at this time the county was completely dry, actually, which means that you could not buy a beer in your favorite restaurant in Sparta. So either way, it didn't matter. They could still give us a beer license to manufacture the way that Dave and I read the laws. So we went to them and said, hey, we want a beer license to manufacture. We made our license out, paid the $250, and then there's another $300 on top of that when they give you the paper. And so they said, boys, this ain't never been done here before. So we were like, well, the way we read the law, I mean, granted, we're no lawyers, but like the way we read the law, it seems like it should be being done here or whatever. And so we all decided, in the beer board and us decided that we would allow it to be presented to the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, and whatever his opinion was, that's what we'd go with.
Well, the cool thing was is that he read over our little letter to him, and it basically came back and said that his opinion was that Don and I could do what we wanted to do. So we get this back, and Don and I are super excited by the fact that, hey man, this guy he sided with us, dude. Where everything's ready and set to roll. But we go back in front of the beer board, and the beer board's like, well, boys, that's just his opinion, and he doesn't live here, so we're gonna deny you guys a beer permit. And we're like, dang it. It's like, this is kind of like the thing that, like, we had all kind of did the handshake thing, the smile and nod and whatever. And
there were no babies to be patted.
No kissing,
Dang
no hugging. So, and the thing is, it kind of came down to the fact that these guys basically just straight up lied to our face. And so, so what we did at that point is we did something that we never really ever wanted to do, and we hired a lawyer. And so we found some guy that we had never met before, but we had been recommended to us by some other dude, and he kind of went through and basically did the paperwork to get us through this next year of litigation. And so a license that should have taken us somewhere about a month and a couple $100 took us close to a year and a couple $1,000. And this was very taxing on Don and I because it was we didn't have financial backers. We didn't have people that were just like, hey, you guys are gonna open a brewery, cool man, let me give you a bunch of pile of money. This was all done on our own, and it was one of those things to where it kind of set us back just a little bit, just the fact of having to go through all these lawyer and court costs and lawyer fees. But it ended up working out because a year later we found a judge that could read the law the same way that we read it, and he gave us this permit and said, hey dude, you guys are ready to roll, man. So somewhere in February of 2007, this judge goes, you guys are ready to rock and roll. And so we're like, sweet. And so at that point, we went through and we did all the paperwork. We kind of set it up and tried to get all the paperwork pulled together for the federal government. And the federal government, there's a decent amount of paperwork that's laid out for you that you really have to be some sort of learned, studied person to actually understand a lot of it. But we went through and figured out the best as we could to our abilities and turned in all this paperwork, and they came back, the federal government came back and basically told us that we were good to go except for we had no tax determination space.
The tax determination room is essentially a place where the beer is kept away from the public, where the government can come in and check, like if you're basically lying on your taxes. So what you say you have in stock, what you say you have, whatever, they can come in and say, this is not right, you guys have lied to me, and now we're going to make you pay. That's essentially what I got from it. So, anyways, Dave and I scrapped the whole idea of a small brewery, and well, we didn't scrap the idea of a small brewery because we're still freaking tiny, but we scrapped the idea of a side business brewery, and we went into the labor of building a brewery right next to the home brewery that would house Calfkiller Brewery. And over the next 2.5 years, we would build this again from about 75% recycled parts. In 2009. We brewed our first batch of beer on October 10th, just to make sure that this cobbled together dairy tanks and whatever system would work. Now that all this historic mumbo jumbo is behind us, let's talk about how beer is made.
But now what's going to happen here is like beer. Beer is made of 4 main ingredients. You've got water, and water's where we're going to start. Water is actually for us comes from the Calfkiller River. And so the city, it runs through the city's treatment facility, comes to us. The only thing we actually take out is the chlorine, because everything other than that is perfect. The alkalinity, the pH, the minerals, the heavy metals, everything is perfect for making Calfkiller beer. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to fill up the brew kettle here. And the brew kettle is going to get full of 390 gallons of water. And the reason for 390 is because it's the only kettle that we have that actually heats. And so we'll heat up here, we'll actually heat up this 390 gallons to 165 degrees. But while that's happening is Don and I are going to be carrying 9 55-pound bags of barley upstairs around here to our milling room. And the milling room is where we actually have a grain mill. And what's going to happen is we're actually going to take the barley and we're actually going to crack open the husk, expose the starches inside to be converted to sugars, and then we're actually going to mix this 450 pounds of barley with 150 gallons of this 165-degree liquid in the mash vessel. And what's going to happen in the mash vessel is the mash vessel is actually going to go through, and that's where some sort of like, the first part of the magic happens. And so what you have is you have this 450 pounds of grain that has been germinated and malted, and so therefore you have the starches are set up to be converted to sugars, and then you're going to mix it with this water. All those starches are going to convert to sugars, and then what we're going to do is we're going to heat the rest of this water to 177 degrees, transfer it up top to the hot water tank, and then we're going to use some sort of piece that we constructed out of an industrial dishwasher to rinse all those sugars out. And so what happens here is we actually take this piece, it locks inside of the tank over here, and then we're going to open a ball valve, and this thing here is actually going to spin under the pressure of the water through gravity, and we're actually going to rinse all the sugars that are inside this nice barley soup out and rinse them out into the brew kettle and collect about 250 gallons of a really sweet, sweet barley tea. And so this barley tea is actually brought to a boil, and the reason for the boil is we're actually going to kill off any infections that may want to live, any microorganisms that may want to live in this sweet liquid. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to coagulate proteins. And there's several through this part, through the sparge, or what they call the sparge or the shower. We're actually going to rinse out some liquid proteins, collect them here in the brew kettle, and then as we bring it to a boil, they're going to coagulate, turn into solids, and actually fall out of suspension. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use the boil to utilize hops. And the hops are actually a great little flower, and so Donnie here is actually going to open the bag. He's going to stick the hops in the camera so you guys can actually smell them through smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision.
And rock it out.
Check out the smell-o-vision. All right. So what is the hop? Here's the hop. The many splendored flower. The fruit of the vine, if you will.
The work of human hands?
Well, it becomes the work of human hands. But the old fruit of the vine. The hop flower essentially will grow, the hop plant will essentially grow 25 feet up a trellis every year. It'll yield these nice little flowers, and these flowers are not only are they the third ingredient of the beer, but they are it's a divine little flower, man. They do three things for the beer. Essentially what they do is they are going to add, and their most important thing that they do is they're going to add bitterness to this otherwise sweet liquid. Okay? So, and what bitterness is going to add is, the way we look at it, is balance. Because otherwise you'd be drinking it going, dang, is this sweet? This stuff is way too sweet. But not with the hop flower. Now the nice thing about this is, and it's a God-given plant, so this is the neat thing about it. It's almost as if it were on the earth, like so many other things that are green, on the earth to actually aid in the beer making process. Because before hops, people would put bog myrtle and the spruce tips and heather, and we've done some of that too. It's fun, but it's not as good as hops. So, but essentially, if you look close into the hop, that's what's going to happen. You see the yellow stuff in there? It's kind of like a polleny substance that is, it's called the lupulin gland, and it is going to break in the boil, and it is going to add the bitterness to the beer. What the other thing it's going to do is it is going to add flavor to the beer, and it also is going to add aroma to the beer. And where you add the hop in the boil, as the boil lasts 90 minutes, is what you get out of the hop. Essentially, if you add the hop earlier on, you're going to get more bitterness from the hop. If you add the hop later on, you're going to get a little bitterness, maybe a little aroma. And if you add it later in the boil, then you might get some aroma and some flavor and no bitterness.
So now we've done this.
Carry on, my friend.
We've actually added all this stuff here in the brew kettle. We've boiled it all for an hour and a half. And then what we're going to do then is we're actually going to cool the barley tea as quick as possible. And the way we cool this barley tea as quick as possible is we actually have this thing down here, which is called a heat exchanger. And the heat exchanger is actually a fantastic machine that just uses liquids to cool liquids. And so outside we've got a dairy tank that has 34-degree water in it that is recycled, and then we actually go through, and as the barley tea comes out of the kettle at 200 degrees, it's going to pass the 34-degree liquid on either side of a stainless steel plate. It's going to transfer the heat from that water, from the barley tea to the water, and it's going to drop from 200 degrees to 73 degrees instantaneously at 8 gallons per minute as we pump it into the fermentation vessels. And the fermentation vessels are actually pretty fantastic, because what's going to happen here is we're actually going to add the fourth and final ingredient, yeast. And yeast is pretty magical. And yeast is actually the thing for us that that is a very, it's a very, how do I say this, forward ingredient in our beer. It's like you can actually, the yeast is very colorful. It actually flavors the beer quite a bit. And that's actually what we wanted, because we have this one strain we use for everything. And what the yeast is going to do is it's actually going to consume all of these barley sugars that we've created. And so you have this nice single cell organism that's going to be dumped in. It's going to consume all these barley sugars, and then it's actually going to produce byproducts of carbon dioxide, which you can hear, alcohol, which you love, and then it's actually going to produce these nice fruit esters and other sort of like different overtones that actually add multiple layers to the beer and complexities. But now, once we add the yeast, it's going to hang out and it's going to work for about a week. And as it works, it's going to do all these things. It's going to consume, it's going to create heat, it's going to create other things. And then when it's done, it's actually going to drop out of suspension into the cones of this tank. And the reason for the cone of the tank is we're actually going to use that cone to harvest the yeast for the next batch. And so we'll pull off these nice, fresh, lively yeast cells that have just kind of gone dormant for a minute. And as soon as we add them back to a new, fresh barley tea, they're going to consume all those barley sugars and create more of the same. And so we can do this anywhere from 30 to 40 times with our strain of yeast that we use and we love. And so after a week, the beer, it now becomes beer. This barley tea has become beer. The yeast is pulled off. The beers are kind of crashed out to about 65 degrees, and then they're transferred from here into our cold conditioning space. And if you kind of follow Donnie around there, we'll find out where cold conditioning happens.
What happens in the cold conditioning space? Well, beers are basically left to sit for 1 week. In this week, they will finish carbonating. It is not pasteurized or filtered. So this product we're going to allow the yeast to settle out as much as possible. And at this point, after a week, and we always taste the beers to make sure they're ready, but like no less than 7 days do one of these beers spend in here, and then they are put into a vessel, such as a keg, and then they are transported to the local watering hole. And that, essentially, is how we make beer. That's Calfkiller.